Rain from Hurricane George made its first appearance on the southern end of Florida overnight. The full force of the hurricane will rip across the Keys this morning, but a wide stretch of Florida's coast will feel some effect from George's punch. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the special edition of Weather Center AM. I'm Bruce Edwards as we continue to monitor a very dangerous Hurricane George that is moving across the Florida Straits, taking dead aim on the Florida Keys. Here's a satellite picture to show us exactly where the situation George is located. Again, a very well-defined hurricane that refuses to die as it continues to work across the Keys after it has come off the coast of Cuba. Now, the 5 a.m. update from the National Hurricane Center has George centered at 23.8 degrees north, 80.7 degrees west. Well, that places the center of the hurricane approximately 85 miles southeast of Key West, Florida. It continues to grow. Once it moved off the coast of Florida over the warm waters of the Florida Straits, it continues to slowly strengthen. Maximum sustained winds now near the center are at 100 miles per hour. And conditions are favorable for additional strengthening of this system over the next 24 to 72 hours. It has been very consistent and persistent in its movement to the west-northwest at about 14 miles per hour. And a little simple calculation at that present pace and speed and direction, that would place the center of the hurricane very near Key West, Florida at approximately 10 o'clock this morning. Central pressure continues to slowly slip, 985 millibars. Now, there are hurricane warnings out for the northwestern Bahamas and hurricane watches out for western Cuba. Stateside in South Florida, the hurricane warnings run from Longboat Key on the west coast around through all of southwest Florida and the Keys to Deerfield Beach on the east coast. And from north of that, from Deerfield to Stewart, and north of Longboat up to Bayport, Florida, tropical storm warnings have been posted this morning. We're joined now by Dr. Steve Lyons, our hurricane specialist, and I mentioned earlier this is the hurricane that refuses to die. It's had a lot of time over land, but now it's over water, a favorable environment for further strengthening, and the Florida Keys just now really starting to get the effects of the system.
That's right. We've been monitoring a lot of the buoy observations along the Keys, and so far it's been strong tropical storm force with a few observations of gust to hurricane force, but that's going to change fairly quickly in the south and central Keys as that hurricane moves closer. Just for you in Miami, that it's still dark there or just becoming light, and you're thinking, oh my goodness, it's Andrew all over again. Don't panic by any means. You're going to get a lot of rain. Most of the strong winds will be with that rain, but you'll probably see some gust to hurricane force, maybe some hurricane force winds, but nothing like Andrew. So just sit tight, stay comfortable, and don't panic.
Well, speaking of southeast Florida, the Weather Channel's been covering both coasts, and we have crews on the east and west coast of Florida. In Naples, Florida, on the west coast, it's Weather Channel's Bill Keneally. And on the east coast, where you were just talking about, Key Biscayne, Florida, we have Jim Cantori. Jim, what's conditions like now in Key Biscayne this morning?
Well, Bruce, in all honesty, the sustained conditions, the persistent conditions haven't changed all that much. We have winds that are below tropical storm force, and occasionally the kicker, of course, are those rain bands. And we have had some gusts that have knocked out power. Approximately 4,000 people now in Miami are without power as a result of these squalls moving through overnight. On our drive over here from Coral Gables, we have seen some scattered debris, some tree limbs and whatnot on the road, even one of the extension cords that goes across that helps to hold the power, the lights has come down as well, but certainly nothing like what we could see with sustained hurricane force of a Category 4 like Andrew was. But no doubt it's going to be a miserable day here with the rain and the squalls moving on through. There is the potential for flooding, and of course, being the fact that we are in the northeast semicircle of the storm, there is the chance that we could continue with that tornado threat. But right now, at least from where I'm standing, that is not a problem. But these things will come in fast, they'll come in furious, and for folks that are outside checking things out this morning, you could easily see winds gusting to near hurricane force as a result of the squall. So that's going to be the biggest problem that we're going to deal with this morning. Well, we're going to take you on to the other coast now as one of those gusts finally kicks on in here. It's you know, we do gust. We gust here easily, 50, 60 miles an hour as these squalls come on through, sometimes with rain, sometimes without. And you can see how the foliage around the Rusty Pelican is blowing around this morning. But what's happening over on the other coast? We are going to find out as we take it over to Bill Keneally, who is in Naples. Bill pretty much dealing with a dry day yesterday, but this morning things have changed a little bit. Let's get a live report from him. Bill?
All right, Jim, thanks a lot. Good morning, everybody. Yes, we are windier today. We are occasionally wetter as well. About 20 minutes ago, a decent little squall came through. And as Jim said, usually the winds are kind of telegraphing the rain. And we had a gust close to 40 miles per hour out here on the beach. The high tide has come and gone. The high tide was around 3 a.m. The next high tide, about mid-afternoon, 3 o'clock-ish. And the tidal variance here, only about 2.5 feet. But that said, there's not a whole lot of elevation. So if you are out and about later on today, factor in that high tide about 3 o'clock this afternoon. The seas are a little angrier today. They could not have been any gentler yesterday, but nonetheless, they will be growing. The hurricane, as Bruce mentioned, is about 85 miles southeast of Key West. Thereby, since we're 100 miles due north of Key West, we're probably on the order of 180 miles to the northwest of the actual center of Hurricane George. So nonetheless, we will get a brush at the very least. Winds are gusting close to tropical storm force here now, but nonetheless, if it were to turn at 20 degrees or so to the right of that projected path, we could be in for a whole lot of trouble here. We'll watch it. Watch for the rain today. We do have a tornado watch. Conditions are favorable for tornadoes. We are also in that right semicircle with the advancement towards the west-northwest. So right now, we'll turn it back to Bruce.
Thanks very much, gentlemen. Bill Keneally live in Naples, Florida. Jim Cantori in Key Biscayne, Florida. This morning, we'll continue with reports from them throughout the course of the day. Again, Dr. Steve Lyons, we talk about the winds. We saw some gusts with Jim over there in Key Biscayne, Florida. We've seen gusts exceeding tropical storm force, and what that's going to do is pile up water as well.
That's right. The storm surge will come up a little bit, but keep in mind the storm surge won't be too large with tropical storm force winds. You really need to have hurricane force and strong hurricane force for Miami to get any significant storm surge. You can see right now that where the circulation center is, Miami, of course, being up in this general area, the Florida Keys dangling down in this area here. And you can see the hurricane force wind radii. Now, these are sustained winds of hurricane force. Look like they're definitely going to go by Miami unless something dramatically changes, which we don't expect. But you're well within the tropical storm force, and of course within those thunderstorms you could easily gust to hurricane force. So it's a dangerous situation, but nothing like a Category 4 sustained hurricane or anything like that. So I can keep in mind Miami. I know it's dark.
West-northwest at about 14 miles per hour. It's expected to continue that motion and that speed, and that would bring the center of the hurricane near the Florida Keys within the next couple of hours, near the midday hour thereabouts. However, that's just the center. You're going to feel tropical storm force winds now and hurricane force winds much earlier than when that system comes on shore. So once again, this is a very dangerous hurricane. Maximum sustained winds still remain at 100 miles per hour, but still hurricane force winds extend outward up to about 45 miles, mainly east of where the center of the storm is, and tropical storm force winds being felt in the Keys and along the South Florida coastline, extending out from the center approximately 175 miles. Central pressure has slipped a little bit more now. It was at 984 millibars, the latest report. Here's a look at some of the warnings that are out. The hurricane warnings out, of course, for the northwestern Bahamas. Hurricane watches out for western Cuba. But stateside, again, the watches and warnings continue across South Florida and continue to creep up the coast as the day progresses. Now, hurricane warnings are in effect from Longboat Key, that's on the west coast here, to Deerfield Beach on the east coast. That encompasses, of course, all of South Florida. Hurricane warnings in effect. North of Longboat Key to Bayport and north of Deerfield Beach to Stewart, tropical storm warnings are in effect, and these likely will be extended farther up especially the west coast of Florida as the day progresses and as George continues to assault the Keys and again eventually move on in towards the Gulf of Mexico. We're joined now by Dr. Steve Lyons, our hurricane specialist, and this hurricane continues to churn and grow, and we're only, now, less folks think that, well, because it was nasty overnight, we're still not really even to the worst of this system in the Keys yet.
No, not at all. Most of the strong winds and heavy rain are still at the center of the circulation or slightly behind it, and that is still about 2 to 3 hours away from the South Keys area there. You can see with the wind radii here, the tropical storm force winds are extending up into the almost up to Fort Lauderdale area, probably wind gusts well above tropical storm force up there as well. So this is affecting all of South Florida, and of course those under a hurricane warning, that indicates hurricane force winds are likely. And so that doesn't mean the eye is going to landfall over you. Right now, we continue to expect that eye to continue on a motion toward the west-northwest.
Well, we are covering both coasts of Florida, of course, with the effects of Hurricane George being felt on the west coast. In Naples, Florida, the Weather Channel's Bill Keneally has been setting up shop, keeping us appraised of the situation. We'll have a live report from him in a moment. But let's go first to the east coast of Florida. In Key Biscayne, Jim Cantori holding down the fort. Last report, short sleeve shirt. This report, windbreaker. Jim, to describe the situation.
Yeah, windbreaker in rain gear, Bruce, as we have the rain's moving on in now, a nice light squall, but we're definitely sustained now at about tropical storm force with winds occasionally gusting to 50, even 60 miles an hour. A little bit of sun has come up here. You can look around a little bit as my cameraman Blair Carper parks across here. You can see the boats that are docked up. They're doing just fine. There's really not a bad chop on the water here in the bay, and these boats are very, very well protected. You can see the skyline in Miami this morning looking good, and very, very little traffic across the causeway this morning. Perhaps with a better angle at that, we can use our storm cam as we zoom in on that, and we'll start off perhaps with the palm trees here swaying in the wind. These winds again sustained at about tropical storm force, and the causeway was quite a ride this morning, Bruce, with those winds gusting 50, 60 miles an hour, as we did have no doubt a little bit of a shake going on in the van. But the biggest problems we have here, sporadic power outages as a result of these squalls with wind coming on in. Mayor Pinellas just spoke to the news media, and he stressed the fact that he's very concerned about the people in mobile homes that stayed in their homes, given the fact that we're still expecting quite a bit of rain here, and he encourages those people to head to shelters, which there are plenty open and there is plenty of room. Other than that, we are battening down the hatches and expecting the worst as we go through the next several hours, but certainly nothing like what they're going to get in the Keys. Let's find out what's happening over in Naples. Bill Keneally has a live report for us. Bill?
All right, Jim, thanks a lot. Again, we are relatively rain-free over here. On occasion, we've had a few showers over the overnight hours. Nothing heavy, and I'd say minimal tropical storm force winds at worst, and only very sporadically and very briefly upwards of 35 to 40 miles per hour. The headline this morning in the Naples Daily News says it all. Ready or not, ready for George, that is. And once again, we're looking at the possibility of a hurricane force wind here later on today. The good news is, looking at the analyzing the situation a little more carefully, this hurricane will be weaker than Hurricane Andrew. It will also be running somewhat parallel, of course, but it will be decidedly south of Hurricane Andrew. And I reference Andrew because in this area, we're at the Naples Beach Hotel. This area had about 800 trees knocked down on the golf course grounds here in Hurricane Andrew. Now, that said, if this does deviate to the right or turns more towards the north, we could be in a whole heap of trouble out here now, but folks, just hunker down, batten down, and wait it out. We will be getting squally weather and possibilities of some tornadoes distinctly possible in these squalls later on today, so surely you want to stay inside, and hopefully we'll maintain power and hopefully provide you with ample reports on the situation out here on the beach. So, Bruce, we're in pretty good shape now. We'll be watching the weather deteriorating, though, later on today. Back to you.
Thank you very much. Jim Cantori live in Naples, Florida, and, Bill Keneally live in Naples, Florida. Jim Cantori live in Key Biscayne. I'd like to remind you, we don't want to put those fellas in any harm's way. That's why we're not on the Keys, where they're getting the worst of the weather right now. But we try to stay ahead of the storm to give you the latest information of the approaching storm. Now, Dr. Steve Lyons joins us again, and the storm system, I'm looking at the infrared satellite picture. It appears to be getting a much better organized. I mean, as far as the higher, colder cloud tops are concerned.
That's right. You can see on this satellite imagery some very, very cold cloud tops exceeding minus 80 degrees Celsius, which is very, very cold. And that's a good indication of very deep thunderstorm activity, which is a function of development.
That's right. And if we look off to the north, you saw that little flange, and well, we do have a tornado watch in effect, as is typical with landfalling hurricanes or tropical storms. Now, a tornado watch in effect until 1 o'clock this afternoon, but we have reports of a tornado warning St. Lucie County. This is a live view from Key Biscayne, Florida. Occasional high gusts of wind mark the early effects of Hurricane George on the Florida mainland. Doppler radar shows the tremendous wind and rain carried by the hurricane. It's a graphic example of what lies ahead for the people of South Florida and possibly other portions of the Gulf Coast. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this special edition of Weather Center AM. I'm Bruce Edwards. We continue to chart the progress and the approach of Hurricane George into the waters of South Florida. I'm joined by Dr. Steve Lyons, and Dr. Lyons, we saw on the radar earlier that, again, some powerful storms wrapping around the center, and they're getting ever so close to the Keys right now.
They are. They're only just a little bit away from, and they're going to impinge on the coast very, very shortly here. Here are the Florida Keys. Here you can see this big band of showers in the yellow and orange there wrapping around, and that's basically in the eastern eye wall of the circulation. The eye center is roughly about right there, and it's moving off here to the west-northwest or northwest at about 14 miles per hour. So when this impinges on the coast here, they're going to have some very, very strong winds there. I'm sure they'll be gusting well over hurricane force.
We've been seeing some gusts, 40 to 50 miles an hour in Key West during the last hour and along the southern portions of Florida along the coast, and we'll talk more about that. And matter of fact, we'll get a bird's eye view of what's going on there. The Weather Channel has live crews both on the east and west coast to keep tabs on George and the effects being felt and the preparations being made. In Naples, Florida, Bill Keneally has been holding down the fort, giving us the update from the west coast. And we start on the east coast, though, in Key Biscayne, Florida, where Jim Cantori has been experiencing the worst of it so far this morning. Right, Jim?
Yeah, the worst, Bruce, especially with the tropical storm force gusts and the squalls that come on through, and occasionally that's what's been causing the problems. You can see here as we look off over my head, the trees that are swaying around with the winds, occasionally 35, 50 miles an hour. This appears to be, the worst that what we've seen on a sustained basis, but as those gusts come through, again, we can get near hurricane force. Approximately 4,000 people without power at the present time. There are some trees down in downtown Miami, but those, again, are very, very sporadic, as are the power outages. The 16 shelters that are open still have plenty of room, and actually the mayor encourages those in mobile home parks to still take heed of that. He's very concerned about the flood potential as well as the potential for tornadoes in this area. And you can see we even have some breaks in the clouds out there, and these boats that are in the dock are actually doing very, very well. There's not a lot of wave motion here. They're pretty protected. It's almost like a little peninsula dock here where there's not much wave action in this area. So all in all, things are faring pretty well here, Bruce, in Key Biscayne. We haven't heard of too many problems over this way, and as a matter of fact, a few people have already come out this morning to survey their boats, and so far, so good. Let's find out how things are going on the other coast. Let's take a trip over to Naples. Here's a live report from Bill Keneally. Bill?
All right, Jim, thanks a lot. Things are decidedly brighter over here, I might add. We've had a little rain overnight, but not a whole lot. There's still some sun trying to peek through the cloud cover off to my right. It is windier today. Winds are probably on the order of 15 to occasionally 25 to 30 miles per hour, and higher in some of the squalls coming through. But again, it's very bright out here now. I don't see any sign of rain coming at us. But as we pan off to my left, we can look out over the water. A very dark purple sky there, some rain, and going down the beach, you're heading down towards South Naples and Marco Island. That is the area where they do have a mandatory evacuation. Some 42,000 residents were asked to leave their homes here in Collier County. That is about 20% of the population. So far, though, so good, and hopefully with that track taking that turn a little more west-northwesterly, we can keep the hurricane force winds at bay. But I don't want people to let their guard down. This weather pattern will still be going downhill and probably in a pretty big way around the noontime hour. So rain and squalls, also a tornado watch in effect. So folks, even though it looks rather appealing out here now, please stay inside and endure from the cozy confines of the house. Back to you, Bruce.
All righty, thank you. Bill Keneally reporting live from Naples, Florida, and prior to that, Jim Cantori live in Key Biscayne, staying ahead of the storm and giving us updates on the situation. Dr. Lyons, again, as we look at the satellite picture of the storm, still remains very, very well defined, very classic shapes to this storm.
That's right. And the circulation center, of course, is right about in here, continues to move this way, and we may see a better defined eye here show up later this afternoon or within the next 3 to 4 hours.
Yeah, we had an eye visible earlier. It sort of clouded over a little bit, but don't be fooled by that. It is not weakening by any stretch.
That's right.
As a matter of fact, the latest observation as of the 7 a.m. from the Hurricane Center centered the hurricane at 24 degrees north, 81.1 west, or approximately 55 miles southeast of Key West. Maximum winds continued to grow through the early morning hours up to 100 miles an hour, and mainly to the east of the eye itself. it continues in that very steady course. I mean, that's one thing you can say about this storm. It is an unrelenting in that west-northwest course at about 14 miles an hour. And again, at the present course and speed, that would place the center of the hurricane very near Key West, Florida at roughly noontime today. But as we've been mentioning, again, it's not where the center of the storm is. You'll feel the effects well out ahead of it. Tropical storm force gusts now and hurricane force are not really all that far away from the center of the storm itself. Now, the warnings, of course, are posted in the islands in the northeast, western Bahamas, as well as hurricane watches in western Cuba, and, of course, over South Florida. From Longboat Key on the west coast, wrapping around through the Keys up to Deerfield Beach, hurricane warnings are in effect. And from Deerfield north to Stewart, Florida on the east coast, and from Longboat Key north to Bayport, Florida on the west coast, tropical storm warnings are in effect. And it's anticipated, though, as the hurricane moves up towards the Gulf of Mexico, you may see these watches and warnings dropped along the east coast later today, but they'll likely be expanded over the west coast as it continues on this morning. Now, winds are a big part of this system itself. We've been seeing some gusts upwards of 50 miles an hour, but heavier gusts have been reported in South Florida already this morning.
That's right. This Fowey Rocks that's just off of Key Biscayne, gusts to 73 miles per hour. Now, keep in mind, what the Hurricane Center forecasts is a 1-minute sustained wind, which are these numbers, the 40s, the 35s, the 45 at Sombrero Key, 35 at Key West. And for those of you in Miami, typically damage to structures does not begin until the wind reaches a sustained force of about 50, and then you may have very minor damage there. Vegetation damage, of course, depends on what the state of the vegetation is in.
Yeah, we can see some branches go, maybe even a few loose shingles perhaps get torn up a bit, but as you mentioned, it has to be sustained. We can see with the colorized satellite view, again, a very concentrated area of high cold cloud tops right smack dab in the middle of the system.
Yeah, and then notice here all this shower activity developing to the north here. That's rather typical as the system approaches a land area. The wind slows down over the land. It's moving fast here. It converges and produces rain right at the coast. We'll see a lot of that. And keep in mind, Bill Keneally's on this side, Cantori's here. The wind is going to make a trajectory overland the next few hours, so this coast will not experience that strong of winds. They won't get the real strong winds until the hurricane's over on this side and they come straight out of the south over water.
All righty, we do have a tornado.
Even the toughest critics in the game.
People who know me, I don't get too excited about anything. And I don't endorse anything I don't use or believe in. I use Tri-Metal, and I believe in Tri-Metal.
I'm telling you, this club's for real. This is the direction.